Good afternoon. It is Thursday, October 28th. I'm George Latimer, Westchester County Executive, and we're here to share with you a brief preview of the proposal that we will be delivering on November 9th to the Westchester County Board of Legislators for Westchester County government's budget for the year 2022. Just to review the basic time frame, Westchester County, like all towns in Westchester and 4 of our major 6 cities, are on calendar year fiscal years, meaning that the new fiscal year begins on the first day of January each year and expires on December 31st of that year. In our particular case, we are required to submit to the Board of Legislators for their review and ultimate adoption on or about the 10th of November, the proposed budget from the administration on that date, and then the Board of Legislators has sufficient time to evaluate it over a slightly more than a month period of time, gain public input, and then make some final decisions and amendments to the budget, which then comes back to the executive for our final review. That could involve using veto powers for the overall budget or line item vetoes or signing the budget into law. All of those actions have to take place on or about December 27th to allow for a couple of days to review and file so that the new budget can go into effect on January 1st. We continue to have an on-time budget here in Westchester County. It's never been an issue in Westchester. So we're working against that traditional calendar. And our briefing today is consistent with what we've done each of the last 3 years when we've had budgets that our administration was prepared to submit to the Board of Legislators. We have also added to the situation this last few years from what was the previous practice of a budget input session for the executive branch before we finalize the budget. That session was held this past Monday in 2 locations, in Mount Kisco and in New Rochelle, to open it up to residents of the public to comment, and they gave us different recommendations for a host of different changes in the budget, which we appreciated and received. I'm joined in the studio today with the 2 key executives of county government that join me in most of the key decision makings we have. Ken Jenkins, who is our Deputy County Executive, and Joan McDonald, who's our Director of Operations. They're here in the studio with me. If we get certain questions before the end that require their input, we'll be happy to do that. Now, we still have, from where we are today, slightly more than a week to finalize the document. There are some tweaks that are being looked at and made. We're trying to finalize all of our numbers, make sure that we have solid numbers that we can stand behind. When we present it to the Board of Legislators, they will go through a public process, 2 public hearings in different parts of the county before they have a meeting that adds anything to the budget that they think is relevant, and then they go through the budget to make deletions in revenue and deletions in expenditures for the final document that they will vote on the date established by the board. And they have established those dates. You can go to the Westchester County Board of Legislators website. You can access it through the county website, westchestergov.com, or directly to the Board of Legislators and look at the dates and the locations that the board has established for review of the budget. When they meet and they finalize the budget, as I've said a second ago, it comes to the executive branch for final approval, and we dialogue and negotiate through the whole process. What we present today is just a little thumbnail sketch so you get an idea of what the budget looks like and have some sense of where the county is heading. The first and most important thing to mention in terms of the content, the overall budget is at this point targeted to be a $2.2 million budget. That number is slightly above last year's $2.1 billion budget, and the increase is directly tied to the American Rescue Plan Act, the ARPA funding that comes from the federal government. The money that we're going to receive, slightly below $100 million, is reflected as a revenue, the money that we receive from the federal government, and then as expenditures, those programs that are enhanced, that are paid for by the ARPA money, as an expenditure. The net result of that is zero impact on the county budget, but it does raise the overall amount of money. So we go from $2.1 billion last year to $2.2 billion this year, primarily on the back of the ARPA money conduit. And that money will be reflected next year as well when we deal at some point in time with the budget for 2023. But for the 2022 budget, that budget involves not only that amount of spending, our workforce has dropped dramatically. The day we took office, January 1st, 2018, there were 4,608 individuals on the county payroll. As of the last pay period here in 2021, so it would be in the month of October of 2021, we have 4,399 employees, slightly more than 200 less employees in the workforce than we had at that point in time. So that is a reduction in the number of people in the workforce, and we make decisions on hiring positions and filling positions or keeping them vacant if we can accomplish the mission that we have and do so without having to spend money on personnel. On the same token, we want to make sure we have the people necessary to police our parkways, to treat our sewerage, to be involved in the administration of our transportation services, the bus system and the airport, to be able to do a host of different things in our health department, in our mental health department, and so forth. So the workforce has decreased over the course of these 4 years. This budget reflects that. Perhaps the single biggest matter of interest to taxpayers in the county is what happens to my taxes. And what the county government establishes at the end of the budget process is a county property tax levy. How much money will be collected through county property taxes by all of the different commercial and residential and other use taxpayers. That number has gone down in the last two budgets by $1 million each year. In other words, we collect $1 million less in property taxes in the last two budgets. The budget that led into 2020, adopted in 2019, and the budget for 2021, which was adopted in 2020. This year, the budget that we will present to the Board of Legislators will further decrease the county property tax levy by $7 million. That's a significant reduction further than the reduction of the last 2 years. That's an aggregate of $9 million in reducing the county property tax levy. That is a reduction in county property tax levy for the third straight year. We have not had 3 straight years of reduction in the county property tax levy since 1999, 2000, and 2001. And I know because I was chairman of the legislature during those 3 years of property tax reduction. Though that reduction reflects the presence in the budget of non-property tax revenue that helps us balance out our budget. I'll talk about that in a second. But I want to highlight that 3 consecutive years of reducing the property tax levy compares to a prior administration, which took great pride in having 8 years of no property tax increase. They trumpet that they made the effort not to decrease it. That was what the Board of Legislators received. In the first of those years, the board created a property tax decrease, but the administration submitted 8 straight years of no increase. We're now submitting our 3rd straight year of a decrease. That may be counterintuitive to those of you who see the world through partisan lenses, but it is a matter of fact. You're welcome to look at our county budgets online for 2021, the one we're operating under now, the budget for 2020, the budget for 2019. There are extensive documents, but if you want to see the facts, the actual reality of things, and the results of our efforts, then you can find it by looking at the budget and making comparisons from there. We have been working with revenues that we receive in Westchester County that we have shared back to local municipal governments as well. And it is working the way it is intended. Each of the towns and 4 of the cities are receiving certain benefits from county tax results, primarily in sales tax, that goes back to help them lower their local property taxes. So in your towns, your cities, your school districts, they're receiving a direct amount of allocation of money, revenue stream from the county, excuse me, that is significant and helps doing it. As a comparison, there is no such share back in Putnam County. Putnam County's revenues are not shared with the 6 towns and the 2 villages of Putnam County. We here in Westchester County do, in fact, share those resources, and we think that's appropriate. We have identified over the course of the 4 years of this administration non-property tax revenues. We mention and we repeat again that we now have a program for demand response contract where we reduce the use of electricity on peak nights of demand. In so doing, the county receives revenue because it's less expensive to pay the county to go off the grid than it is to buy electricity on the grid at nights of peak usage and need. Think of, those nights in July and August when it's so hot that everybody has their air conditioning on all night long. By being involved in this program, we get an additional $200,000 a year that did not exist prior to our taking office. We also have negotiated and signed and now benefit from a payment in lieu of taxes, a pilot agreement with Airbnb, which provides us $300,000 a year of revenue. That revenue stream did not exist prior to this administration, and those kinds of revenue streams represent ways to offset having to use property tax revenue in order to balance the budget. We'll mention that last year we had a voluntary separation incentive. We talked about it at the time. It was a cost-cutting measure as we were very concerned about trying to close out the 2020 budget in the COVID year. We knew that revenues had fallen off. And in so doing, we made $11 million of savings in the current budget. That's why it's important to know that our total workforce, actual on-the-job workforce, is lower today than it was 4 years ago, the day we came into office. And that is in no small part to that voluntary separation incentive. It's also important to know that we have negotiated contracts with major suppliers of different services to the county, Liberty Lines, which we are in a public-private partnership to operate our bus system, Wheelabrator, that's involved in our disposal of garbage through the Charles Point plant. And in both of those two negotiations, we have saved significant money for the county over the life of those contracts. The 5-year Liberty Lines contract saves Westchester County $20 million. The contract with Wheelabrator over 10 years saves $17 million for Westchester County. So savings on expenditures, non-property tax revenues, and keeping the workforce balanced in size are all factors that help us being able to do this. The money we receive from the federal government is not warehoused, and it's not stuck away for some secret purpose. It is built into the budget. The Board of Legislators will ask questions, and we will provide information to them on the review of the budget, so it is clear to the press and to the public exactly how the money we receive from the federal government is being used. We know by general categories it will go to handle overtime of our police and our correction officers, who are always subject to having to work additional hours to compensate for officers who may be out because of COVID or people who are exposed through contact tracing, identified through contact tracing, and that the additional money we receive can go to that purpose. We've used that money to help support small businesses. We've used that money to support feeding programs for those in need and a host of other important necessary things. In this budget, we have maintained the basic services that we have provided over the last 4 years in Westchester County government. We reinstituted, as one example, the household cleanup days. We have 3 of them a year, one at Playland, one at FDR Park in Yorktown, and one in Yonkers. And those were discontinued. We reestablished them, and this budget continues those services. And it continues services like that directly benefit or indirectly benefit the public over an extended period of time. It's important to know that we have some new initiatives, a couple of which we've talked about before. I just want to highlight a few of them for you so you get an idea of what to look for when you see the full budget, to the extent that you're going to analyze it. We already announced previously that as one point of our police reform and reimagination efforts, we've identified the need to recreate a mental health crisis team system in the county. So there are trained mental health professionals who can respond alongside the police when certain types of calls come in about incidents. And both the police organizations and the management of the police department support this action, this recommendation that came out of the Police Reform Committee, and we are implementing it. And in this budget, we've allocated $6.4 million to create 8 mobile crisis response teams across the county. 3 of them we hope to be in place between now and the end of the year in 3 locations. The other 5 will come online next year for a total of 8. We'll test the program. We'll see how it works. The mission is to provide mental health services to those who are having a crisis moment, which might be otherwise reflected in just a police response. The police responds, but so do the mental health professionals, and we hope by doing that we'll accomplish something positive. We also have on our list expansion of the child care subsidy program, an additional $5.6 million in additional funding. It enables more families to have children receive child care at a reduced cost for the parents. Families up to 85% of the state median income, that's $89,226 for a family of 4, will now be eligible for subsidies. This is an eligible income increase of roughly $10,000 to $15,000. It depends on the family size as compared to the current program. It provides resources for a larger group of families, and we know that child care is an important service, not merely because it is a social good thing to do, but it frees up parents to work productively. When they work productively, they can bring more money home to their families, help support their families. They contribute that money into the economic structure and system of the county by the services and goods they buy, the taxes they pay. So this is a win-win around the board when we provide additional support for child care programs. We are looking at funding healthcare equity and access for $6 million. That includes both funding for federally qualified health centers and clinics with a host of equipment and telehealth capacity and outreach improvements. That's $4 million in this budget. That's a new initiative. And then also the Healthy Moms, Healthy Babies Nurse Home Visiting Program, which will receive an additional $1 million. The health centers are often located in areas that are relatively underserved by the medical system, and we get more people who are poor, more people who are in various groups, people of color, to be able to access preventive health care earlier in the time frame when they need it, particularly for their children, but for themselves as well. You save money in delivery of health care when you are preventive prior to something becoming a problem, by the time which it is much more expensive and the results are much less positive when you react after a certain point. This allocation of money, these programs, we think will help along those lines. Also want to highlight that in this budget, we have an initiative that will support for small landlords a rehabilitation assistance program, $1 million, where the county will reimburse 75% of the cost of physical improvements to a home made by qualifying landlords in exchange for keeping rents affordable for a period of 10 years. There are many landlords that do not have the resources, the personal resources or the access to capital to be able to improve their homes that they use for rental purposes. And the people who live in these homes tend to live in declining status situations, and that contributes to a problem in the society. But the only way to correct it is by trying to find some opportunity for capital. This program will help some of those small landlords. We're not trying to help those who are already successful financially and just choose not to invest in their properties, but for people who want to do the right thing but can't access the capital. And we're going to try to help bridge the gap with our effort in this regard. We have a program where we're setting aside money for not-for-profit organizations and religious institutions for grant technical assistance funding and for their program by which we help them directly in doing some of the works that they have to do. These are for non-religious activities, but these are activities that are germane for the services they provide to the public at large. Technical assistance applies to these and other available groups with grants, and we think that will help these organizations, which are a large workforce within our county. 20% of our workforce falls into the area of not-for-profits, which includes religious institutions. And they provide necessary services in innumerable ways. And to maintain those services, we believe this program will be helpful, and particularly in the aftermath of COVID. We also have a program in here sponsored through our Department of Emergency Services that will provide a pilot program for tuition reimbursement for local volunteer firefighters and EMTs. It's $500,000 that's being set aside. We will lay out the program specifics a little bit when we present the budget, and then more so once we start to implement the program. It reimburses fire and EMS new recruits for college trade school tuition, for student loan payments in exchange for a volunteer commitment to their local fire department and EMS. And you can tell that in every community there's a dying need for additional volunteer firefighters and EMS. Some communities have all volunteer forces. This is essential for them. They can receive up to $2,000 a semester, and we will start the program with 100 applicants, and then we'll see how far we can go. Can we replicate it? Can we make it something more robust? We also have a youth upliftment program that is structured in this budget for $500,000. It's a public nonprofit partnership program. It identifies 50 to 100 preteens in middle school. It focuses on wellness and fitness and life skill training with mentoring and life coach. We'll be doing this through the Department of Social Services, our Parks Department, and our Youth Bureau, and we think that this program is a good pilot that will help us move forward. When we present the budget in detail, we'll go into some of other initiatives that are scheduled, things that tie into other items that we've talked about here, but it's important to look at the budget holistically, and the tendency for many people is to look at it just from the standpoint of tax impact. So to sort of repeat the rough outline for today, our budget is going to be relatively flat in total spending with the exception of the additional ARPA money that we're going to have. That additional amount of money, slightly under $100 million, will raise the total spending almost equivalent to the amount of money that we're receiving in the ARPA program. Our workforce continues to be lower today than it was 4 years ago, and as we go into the new budget year, we'll have the option to determine where we have to add positions when appropriate in order to make sure we maintain the services that we provide. We have a series of program initiatives that will be new, that I've just sort of described and sort of outlined, many more programs to come. And then most importantly for those that care about this, we are cutting the Westchester County property tax levy by $7 million this year. That follows 2 consecutive years where we cut it $1 million each year. And this is only the second time in 20 years where we have cut our property tax levy in the county government 3 straight years. Now, keep in mind when you pay property taxes, the vast majority of money you pay in property taxes goes to your school district. If you pay $20,000 a year, you pay approximately $13,000, maybe $14,000, depending on where you live, to your school district. Then the remaining portion, about a third of your budget, your tax bill, I should say, is divided between your municipal governments, however you're structured. If you live in a village, which is within a town, if you live in a town outside a village, or if you live in a city, your municipal contribution is just about what the county contribution is. County may be a little bit higher, but they both together represent together about a third, so each one is about a sixth of your total impact. When we cut property tax levy, an equalization rate from the state is applied. The local assessment rolls are used to look at to weigh between municipalities what the relative amount of county tax levy is going to be paid in that particular community. That will govern what happens to you and your individual taxes. But when the property tax levy goes down, you are in an advantaged situation. The opportunity for you to have a tax cut is greater. Now, when we come back with greater details, when we announce this on November 9th, excuse me, we will continue to talk on the substance of governing. That is what today is about, the substance of governing. It's important to understand there's a difference between politicking and governing, and I understand both of those two worlds when you practice each of those. Where we have a debate over what direction we should take in government, the political process provides that. The ideal way to have that debate is in a public debate between candidates. When one candidate chooses not to debate, you, the individual resident, loses the opportunity to see both candidates side by side and to hear the point, the counterpoint, the argument, the defense of the argument that will help you understand how to evaluate these things. But in the world of governing, I'm tasked, as I was with what occurred in the voters 4 years ago, to provide what we believe is the proper direction for the county. And when we cut property taxes, those things are hard facts. Those are not matters of opinion. And I find that when somebody from the sidelines sort of snipes at these things, they're really not showing the substance that's necessary. I tend to look at that and say, well, that's just politics. You're almost advertising that you really don't understand the governance process because you're not looking at things holistically in terms of the whole budget and all of the different priorities. But, of course, you will decide where you place your weight. But we provide you with the substance. The county budgets that we've adopted up to now are all online. They're dense documents, but they're there for your analysis if you want to analyze them. And if you want to analyze them, then you'll get to the actual substance of what government is and not just the rhetoric that accompanies that. It's important for us to understand that there is a time for us to debate, to have the discussions about what direction government moves in, but then there's a time to have substance and to move forward. That's what today is, to give you a sense of where we're going to go with the budget. When we present the budget to you, to the Board of Legislators, to the public, to the press, you'll be able to query us on any of these different issues. We'll respond as intelligently and as directly as we can, and we will try to explain what our rationale is on these things, what the choices were, and why these particular choices we think are the best possible choices, where we are today at this point in Westchester County government. I'm going to consult with my communications team to see if there are any questions that have been received. We have no questions from the press. We're certainly happy to answer those questions and dialogue with the press. You're welcome to reach out to Catherine Chaffee at 995-2932. And of course, when we present the full budget in a public setting like this on November 9th, we would invite you to come to see all of it. We'll have copies available online so you can take it from there. I am George Latimer, Westchester County Executive. Thank you for taking the time to watch. We hope this informs you a bit about the direction we're going in. We ask you to stay tuned for the full presentation when it comes on November 9th, and then to be engaged in the overall process. If you care about good citizenship, be engaged in the overall process that leads up to the board's adoption of the budget as they choose to modify it, and then the actions that we take after that, which will take us through December. And then by January 1st, the new year begins, and Westchester County government will continue. Thank you very much for watching. Have a good day, and be safe.